Hey, we've been talking a little bit about Ephesians, and recently when we were looking at Ephesians at Crave, we found there was some stuff in it that was really helpful for us about thinking about our vision and what it means for us to be a church. And I spoke a little bit on a clip you may have seen about Ephesians 4:6, in which it says there's one faith and one Lord and there's one baptism and we're all united in one body. And I want to go into a little bit more depth today into other parts of Ephesians 4. I think that in Ephesians 4, as you read through it, you can see that there are three different scenes that emerge. There's what's going on a cosmic level, what's happening with Christ. And there's also what's happening on a community level, more about how this affects us as a church, how we operate. And it also talks about what happens on a personal level, in terms of unity happening in the body. And so it helps us to get this great big whole panoramic scene of what it means for Ephesians 4 to tell us that we're united as a community. And today, what I want to do is get a little bit into the cosmic level. And when you see on that global panoramic angle what it is that Christ has done and how Christ has unified us as a community, it tells us a lot about how we can change our thinking about God and how we can change our relationship to God, but also how we can think about ourselves differently. And I find this really, really helpful. I want to read to you just after it talks about one Lord, one faith, one baptism. It says in Ephesians 4:7 and 8, "But to each one of us grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people." So this idea of giftedness that we so often talk about in the church, the gifts that we sometimes say that we've received from Christ. I want to challenge that idea a bit later. But the grace that has been given to us that enables us to live that gifted life is about Jesus' victory. And that's what's so exciting to me about the book of Ephesians, that in that victory that Jesus has, we're formed into a community. And the world and the church are unified, and we get meaning ourselves on that personal level from what it means to be a part of that. And I know that I found it so fulfilling in my life. I can't think of anything that's been more fulfilling for me than being able to say, I'm part of a community, I'm part of a group of people, and I contribute to it, and I'm protected by it, and I'm loved in that context. Myself makes so much more sense when I understand how I relate to other people, and that is the thing that Christ has done for us. So on this cosmic level, Ephesians says that Christ has been made the head of all things, and we have been made the body. And that's this incredible metaphor of the body which Paul uses in Ephesians to talk about how we're united. We're like a body and we function in that way. And Jesus, as the head, is the thing that unites us. We often hear the word head and we think about CEOs, we think about corporate heads, we think about headship as being this hierarchical thing. But Paul's not thinking that, because the image that he gives of a body is that Jesus as the head died and gave himself for the body. So it's not about the body serving the head, it's not about the head having authority over the body. At least that's not what Paul is talking about here. What he's talking about in headship is providing. He's talking about nurturing and bringing together and uniting. And I compared that in something that I said in the last clip. I compared it to the idea of a wiki, of a kind of an internet site where instead of just people sending a million different emails all over the place, sending emails to everyone, you're able to actually get all the information together in this central hub, and that's able to unite all that information together in one order. And that's the way that headship functions in Paul, headship functions in Ephesians, as this principle that brings unity and this principle that brings life. So how does Jesus do that? It says here in Ephesians that he ascended, that he descended into the lower parts of the earth, and then he ascended on high. And in that victory, in that triumph that Jesus had, Jesus brought the whole world together, because Jesus became the King, Jesus became the Lord. And in doing that, all people were united under him. Now, I don't know how far, when it says in Ephesians that Jesus descended into the lower parts, I don't know if that means Jesus ascended to the earth. Some people think it means Jesus ascended into hell when he died. Some people think that it means he ascended into death. I'm not sure exactly what that means. But the purpose of what Paul is talking about here is not how far he went down, but the fact that in rising again from the dead, in that triumph of Easter Sunday morning when God raised Jesus from the dead, God was actually appointing Jesus to be the head of humankind, to be the one that would give us life, to be the one that would bring us unity and form us into a body. And in that triumph, in that victory, what Jesus did was to create a community. And Paul says, at that moment, this is where I get excited about Ephesians, that it was at that moment of victory that Jesus gave gifts to people in the same way that a conquering military leader in the ancient world would conquer and would then give gifts to people. Paul uses that as an analogy of the fact that when Jesus defeated death and when Jesus defeated sin, because of that victory, he was able to give gifts to people. And here's the exciting part for me, is that we are those gifts. We talk about gifted people in the church as though that means that we get the gift. Like I got the gift of being a prophet. Jesus gave me this present of being able to minister to other people. And now I have this gift. And that's very precious to me. But in Ephesians, we don't get the gift given to us. We are the gift that is given to the community. And if we're able to think about ourselves in that way, as a person who's being given up, as a person who's being handed over as a precious gift to other people, to give your life for other people, to be given as a gift, that is what I want to say to you will be something in which you can find the thing that makes your life deeply meaningful. What is it that this world so desperately needed, that this world was lacking, that God said, I'm going to make this person, I'm going to make this unrepeatable miracle, and I'm going to present that person to the world. I'm going to give that person as a gift. That is so radically different from thinking that we receive a gift, that we're given as one. This is what it says in Ephesians 4:11 now and through to 13. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith, in the knowledge of the Son of God, and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. These gifts are gifts that are about ministry. A lot of people talk about the charismatic gifts that Paul talks about in Corinthians. I think that they're something else. These gifts are actually about ministry. They're about being called to service. And I think that there are people that are like that. There are people that God has placed in the church and placed in the world to be set aside in order to be ministers of God's grace to the world. But I want to say that there are a lot more people that are gifted in that way than there are people who know about it. And there are a lot of people in our community who are called to be teachers, are called to be pastors, are called to be evangelists, who don't realize this. And what I want to encourage you to do today in response to what we read in Ephesians is to really assess yourself, to take a look at yourself and say, is there something that this world needs that I need to be given in order to meet that need? Paul talks about apostles, and I think that what Paul is talking about there is people who act with authority to create churches and to create communities. A person who actually creates a new space where people are able to worship God and find community. Prophets are people who are able to speak the word of God with a certain amount of authority. Evangelists are people who proclaim God's grace to the world. And pastors and teachers, I think they're two words for the same kind of person. They're people who nurture and guide and instruct other people. And what I want to encourage you to do is think about, are you one of those people? Do you have those kinds of abilities? If you do, then that's how you discern the fact that you might be an apostle, a prophet, an evangelist, a pastor, a teacher, and it will be a costly thing to recognize that about yourself. It will be about existing for the sake of other people. We often get trapped, churches get trapped into thinking that the world exists for the purpose of us. You know, we so often brand our churches, I spoke about this a bit before, and we want to promote them, and churches compete against each other. Those people are acting as though they had a gift. They're not acting as though they're given as a gift. And for the church to be able to give itself up is very costly, but it's also about existing for the sake of other people. It's about existing in a way that I want to tell you is incredibly rewarding, is just the most fulfilling way to live, being able to give yourself up in that way, to know that you have a purpose. It brings your life together in the most incredible way. You know, maybe you can imagine yourself being a person who has great vision, being a person who is able to bring together ideas and form new things. Maybe you're a person with deep passion about speaking the truth. Maybe you are a person who has compassion and is able to nurture and care for other people. Those are the skills that Paul is talking about here, these gifts of ministry. And I want to encourage you to really think, is that me? Does that describe me? And it's not just about reflecting on yourself and navel gazing and thinking, I think I have these skills, because what you need to do is try them out and see if you can do them consistently for a long period of time and see if you can bring results. If you're the sort of person that's able to do that, then I want to ask you to consider the really costly question of whether I am a person who needs to give myself up, put aside my plans, my ambitions, my hopes, my dreams, and instead allow myself to be given up in service for the church. That's what, on the cosmic level, Paul is talking about in this book of Ephesians. If you are a person who is not having one of these ministry gifts, then there are many other ways that you can serve in the church. There are many other ways that you can be a part of it. And I want to encourage you as well to continue to develop your gifts and your skills. But to those of us who are set aside for the purpose of working, who have this calling on our lives, that is something that needs your full attention. That needs you to make that the central goal of your life, to fulfill that calling.